All right, so in this first clip coming up, first media block coming up, I have to cover some like odds and ends, miscellaneous news this week that doesn't fit into a major block, but you guys should know about. One of them is a really graceful report from Conyers, Georgia. So this past week we had Hurricane Helene, and we're going to get to that section because it's a heavy duty section that comes later tonight. But there was a chemical. The company was called Biolab, and it makes chlorine. So there was chemical explosion. There's chlorine gas, which was used in World War II as a chemical weapon, or at least World War One. I think they banned it after that. Going throughout the parts of our country, poisoning people, putting them at risk, and they're not being warned. And this also could happen because there's many types of manufacturing plants that if they caught fire, it will be poisonous to our environment. So just because you don't live in Conyers, Georgia, doesn't mean you shouldn't be aware of such things in your environment, because that's what situational awareness and preparedness and general survival dictates that we pay attention to, because there's a lot of noise in the system out there. But if you live close to disaster sites and you don't think about it beforehand, it would be a very panicking situation, as I'm sure it was for the people in Georgia. And then from there, we're going to go into the VP debate block, because there's a lot of levity this week. There's a lot of word saladness to these things. And I want to get our laughs going and fortify our mental immune system before we tackle some of the tougher subjects tonight in this journey. So we're going to go first to Really Graceful, then we're going to go to Sky News, and then we'll come back with DC Shorts, a debate recap before we get to the analysis of what they said, or the commentary and the making fun of what was said. We need to actually see what happened a little bit. So let's go to this block, and prayers for people in the path of Helene and Conyers, Georgia.
Y'all about hey internet friends, let me tell y'all about the latest chapter in the saga of our lives over here in Atlanta, or more specifically, just a stone's throw away in Conyers. It's currently Wednesday when I'm recording this, but on Sunday morning, a company named Biolab, who makes pool chemicals, according to the official story, around 5 a.m. the sprinklers started malfunctioning. And unfortunately for everyone, Biolab makes water reactive chemicals, causing a huge chemical explosion, and it's been smoldering ever since, coating the sky in haze and filling the air with the aroma of chlorine, creating this big toxic cloud darkening the sky. And I don't know about you, but to me, this story is sketchy at best. Not all these details are checking out, and honestly, there's a shortage of details on this story. A lot of y'all on this channel are from Georgia, myself included, but my house is about 40 to 50 miles away from Conyers, where Biolab is located. I want to know what you're experiencing, what the sky has looked like near you for the last few days, what it smells like, how you're feeling. Initially, 17,000 residents were evacuated, and they issued shelter-in-place orders for over 90,000 residents of Rockdale County due to concerns over air quality, particularly the presence of chlorine gas, which I, of course, haven't seen news stations point this out, but it's very important. During World War I, chlorine gas was used as a chemical weapon by the Germans. And what happens is when it's inhaled, it reacts with your mucus, and it can lead to choking and death. So imagine if you're inhaling that chemical cloud even a little, it's probably very irritating and can cause you harm, because it's basically similar to the kinds of chemical weapons that were banned by the Chemical Weapons Convention and the Geneva Protocol of 1925. And I just want to state the obvious here. Let's say this was done on purpose. Chlorine gas explosion released on a very populated area, that would be considered a weapon of mass destruction, an act of war. I also just want to say that the messaging around this disaster and these emergency notifications have been so confusing. They told everyone in the affected area to shelter in place, but the last thing you want to do when you're being gassed is shelter in place. It doesn't matter if you have the windows closed on your house, even though that's what Rockdale County government advised. Sheltering in place, remaining indoors, and keeping windows closed to minimize the exposure. Like I told y'all in my last video, on Monday, me and my grandparents were just sitting around chatting, and our emergency alerts all went off on our phones, and it was really eerie. The wording of the alert was very strange, saying that the EPA is monitoring the air for these toxins, and that the chemical levels are unlikely to cause harm to most people. For the past few days, the cloud of toxic fumes has blown over from Conyers, I told you I'm 50 miles away from this, into nearby counties like Gwinnett and even Cobb County, which is where my husband works, and he said it smelled like chlorine outside yesterday and it was hazy. As of today, the biolab facility is still smoldering and there's widespread haze everywhere. Reported today, the whole EPA monitoring has detected hydrochloric acid in some of the samples that they're gathering, which people are breathing in, and like I said, when inhaled, it can result in upper respiratory tract irritation, spasms, and if you got a direct hit of it, enough exposure, which I'm not saying is happening in this instance, but if you got enough of it, it would kill you. The first alert I received was 3 p.m. on Monday, and on Tuesday at 1:47 a.m., I received another one of these blaring alerts saying the exact same thing. Unlikely to harm most people, that our house is falling under the affected radius. And they texted me at 2 a.m. to say this. Wake us all up just to tell us nothing. That's like psychological warfare. It's really, really strange. Apparently, there have been several incidents over the years at this lab. The fire, which is Biolab's third significant incident over the past 20 years, comes at a time when part of Georgia has been totally devastated from this hurricane. Like, there are a bunch of people without power, cell phone service, having to boil water, all these things in one part of the state. And now we have this disaster close to Atlanta as well. Thank you to Melissa from True Stream Media who sent me this article from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution dated 2004. The title of the article is Fire Checks Left Up to the Industry, Biolab Workers, Not State Licensed Inspector Examined Sprinklers. Quote from 2004, last month's blaze sent a plume of noxious smoke billowing for miles across East Metro Atlanta. No one died in this whole 2-day ordeal, but it prompted the evacuation of thousands of residents and shut down local businesses. Chlorine-saturated water from the fire hoses contaminated a lake, end quote. So 20 years ago, this exact same thing happened, but on a lesser scale. They were able to salvage a bunch of chemicals and some of the warehouse in this instance. But basically, the article says there's little to no oversight or inspections, and this company, which has all these toxic chemicals, are just willy-nilly doing whatever out there with their proven pattern of negligence, which is actually in line with some of the Google reviews of the company from their former workers. Here's a review from 5 years ago. Horrible management, rude supervisors, very unprofessional workplace environment. Should be shut down. If a fire marshal comes strolling down and does a check, this place would probably be shut down. End quote. And you know what? I'll give it to you, once is an accident. You can't attach malice to an isolated incident which could be attributed to negligence. Twice, you definitely probably should have been shut down. 3 times? I don't know, seems purposeful, seems intentional, seems like we're not getting the entire story. Also, we're not being told the full list of chemicals that were stored at biolabs. We're having all these articles come out now saying that the EPA is detecting chlorine levels exceeding the action level around the facility. But they don't really explain what that means. I think that means don't breathe the air around Conyers. There's now a class action lawsuit you can join. While there's been no reported deaths from this incident, people are posting on social media that their throats hurt, and one guy on X said that his son threw up from exposure. There are posts on social media of ash and debris from the fire being found in people's yards. We'll know nothing of the long-term effects of this exposure until a later date, of course. Like East Palestine all over again, so keep your toxic explosion decor out along with your harp decor and your train derailment decor and your election year decor. October is shaping up to be pretty chaotic. And just a reminder that the government isn't giving away any kind of good advice to anyone beyond it's unlikely to be harmful to most people. Schools and businesses remain open. It's just looking now like the wind is carrying it away to multiple states and out to the coast. Let me know what you think, internet friends. Let me know what you have observed, what you saw with your own eyes if you're over in Conyers. But I hope you're all happy, safe, and healthy as you watch this. Thank you so much for watching, subscribing, supporting my channel on Patreon, and buying my book, The Deep State Encyclopedia.
Tim Walz and J.D. Vance battled it out during the CBS News vice presidential debate. Vance is looking much more comfortable in the setting than Walz, with the Democratic candidate stumbling, mumbling, and making some big mistakes. From the outset, Tim Walz looked very nervous and fumbled the entire first question. Both men were asked if they would support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran. Walz stumbled through his first sentence with very choppy words resembling Kamala Harris's slow start to the presidential debate last month. Shockingly, he then confused Iran with Israel twice, at one point referring to Israel and its proxies. The New York Times jumped on this mistake and fact-checked Walz.
Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, and thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there.
After less than half a minute of answering the question, Walz pivoted to a scripted attack on Donald Trump for the rest of the answer.
It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago, a nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous.
J.D. Vance came out of the gates at full force, displaying his much more confident debating style. J.D. Vance answered the question of an attack against Iran directly, maintaining Trump led through strength on the global stage.
We have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world.
Tim Walz also was then grilled about discrepancies in his Tiananmen Square claims, which have attracted a lot of backlash. He failed to specifically answer the time discrepancy question.
You said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China.
Walz then made a shocking word stumble, saying he made friends with school shooters.
Yeah, I sat in that office with those San Diego parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look.
J.D. Vance impressed and did what many hoped Donald Trump would have done in his presidential debate and fact-checked the anchors on the question of immigration.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn now to the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn now to the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process.
I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. I've become friends with school shooters.
Honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles. You say trust the experts, but those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further, but you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. And the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. As much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put
I think we get it. And there's a couple more clips from the week's news, but I don't want them to be too redundant. Tim Walz, I mean, according to CNN and MSNBC, before that so-called debate, they knew that Walz isn't good under pressure and not good in the debate situation, that he had a lot of anxiety. So golf clap for Tim Walz for not quitting on himself. He got up there, he did his thing. He didn't grab his nuts, but he did like look deer in the headlights a whole bunch of times. That one of the best parts was early on in the debate, Walz not being practiced at this, he didn't realize they were going to split screen him. So usually when Vance is responding, and Vance didn't take a note the whole time. He just did it because he's Yale lawyer trained type dude, right? So he has the experience and the advantage. Walz, the poor guy, like he's scribbling notes. His head's down half the time. Half the time you think like his head's just a big thumb because he's down scribbling like what he's going to say. And he seemed disheveled. But in the first question, he said fundamental like 5 times. And then he's like catching himself on that. Then by the second question, Walz is watching Vance's response, and Vance is saying how Kamala let all these violent gangs come into this country, and Walz didn't know he was split screened. And he goes, I mean, it's a very illuminating frame of reference when you see the VP guy listening to someone bash his boss, and he's like, yep, that happened. You know, if it was a disgusting lie, you would think he'd like frown or like shake his head no. So there was a lot of body language also because he's not very practiced. And, you know, who is? Yale lawyers are, apparently. Scott, what did you think of that first set?
Well, okay, so my first thinking, I'm just going to go back to the biolab thing real quick. So
Mm-hmm.
the biolab explosion is really interesting
Yeah.
because it just rings so, I experienced this firsthand in 2020. I think I've talked about this on the show. Like it was just like the culmination of all of these, like it was the election, the Antifa riots, like it was just like one thing after another, just compounding. And then on top of that, we had these that seemed very contrived fires going on, right? It was like Northern California, Oregon were burning. So the sky was filled with smoke. Like during the day, the sun beaming through the smoke made everything red. Everyone's wearing masks. Like it was just like, it was in addition to the chaos that was happening, we had this natural disaster with like, like potentially man-made. Like I'd be curious to know more about, the origins of that biolab explosion, right? But like out in Oregon, it was pretty well understood that those fires were started by bad actors, right? And it just compounded everything to create just an even more state of disarray. So I was just kind of having flashbacks to that, just imagining these people that were already suffering from this other tragedy, which, debatably, how contrived that was or not, but also then being compounded by this other chemical explosion, chemicals in the air, and just like some of the obfuscation around that. Like it rang true to so much of what was going on exactly this time of year, right before the election, 2020. So it seems like, I don't know, man. Like, is this a playbook? But I don't know. I was just kind of just like, whoa, dude. I remember being in a situation very similar to that.
And then the question is, let's say that happens around you or your family. How do you egress safely? Like, what do you need? Does a family these days need like gas masks, basically? Like
Yeah.
they protect you against nuclear, biological, and chemical. Those are what the I think they're NCBR filters they're called. So if you had that for your family and you put your car on recirculate and hope for the best, you might be able to drive out of that area. But otherwise, like sheltering in place is something that they told Americans to do when? After 9/11. When the anthrax attacks happened, you better duct tape your windows, and everybody was fearful to go outside and breathe the air. How many sci-fi dystopian movies are based on we can't go outside and breathe the air? There's a bunch of them, right?
Very true. Yeah.
So they
Yep.
do produce chemicals and toxins in all of our neighborhood areas. Anywhere across the country, there's these places, right? And we know the regulation. So we're in a state of our country because we've been taken over by the empire. It's in erosion, degradation. And we do have trouble in this country right now in history discerning between an event being lack of maintenance or terrorism. Lahaina, is it lack of maintenance of those electric lines and clearance of trees, or is that terrorism? What just happened in Conyers? Is that lack of maintenance or is that type of terrorism? Because if you can conduct terrorism on your enemy and your enemy doesn't even know it's being terrorized and just think that it has bad luck, there's people out there with the Machiavelli, Clausewitz. There's a whole bunch of strategies out there that can be combined on the deceptive side of people in power. They, them, those who can easily be named and read about if people only use their literacy for freedom instead of entertainment.
Yeah.
That's how I would say that.
Yeah. And this situation kind of puts some validity to the fact, like I remember reading all kinds of prepper supply lists and stuff, and they always say like the number one is a gas mask. And in my mind, I was like, yeah, gas mask, what I mean? But in situations like this, it's like, oh shit, like we probably need gas masks. It's like they say you can live for 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. So out of all that, what is the most urgent if you're in a situation? It's a gas mask because you need air more urgently than water or food. So, I guess I got to up my preps a little bit. But yeah, man, that's just frightening to see, and the imagery of it too, just like the billowing
big
smoke,
cloud.
and it's traumatic to see stuff like that, and just.
And if any of you have ever serviced a pool, you know what chlorine smells like up close, and it burns, and you don't want it to be up close. You want to just get it in the pool, get it in the skimmer real quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
That's a scale where like the wind changes and it affects states and people's health, and that's a situation. So, it's like natural disaster week, whether it's like the chemical fires or the flooding or, FEMA, you got to watch out for all these different threats in your environment.
Yeah.
We're from FEMA and we're here to help is now the scariest phrase in Appalachia.
Yeah, no doubt. And then as far as the debate goes, like it was like just boring. Like there really wasn't any, like probably the most like viral thing was Waltz's like screw up about the school shooter thing, right? That was the most memeable thing out of the whole thing. And it's like, I don't know, but like neither of these guys are that like presidential, like Vance is like new to politics. He's only been around like 18 months. It's like, I don't know, man. It's just kind of like it was just boring. But I will say, I loved seeing the question of the First Amendment getting scrutinized and thrown in there, and he got owned on that topic, and then you see in the news this last week, there's been other examples of the bad guys just putting their foot in their mouth over free speech. Like, I don't know if some people probably saw that Hillary Clinton one where she's like, if they don't edit, censor, or social media, then we lose all our control. It's like, yeah, bitch, that's the point. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, that's
the next block, man.
Okay, I like seeing those ideas being put forth, and then also them making fools of themselves, and free speech wins.
Yeah. And the fact that people have lost their appreciation for free speech means they don't recognize and have yet to encounter what comes when you don't have free speech. Because, here's the sad truth. A lot of the people in the 20th century who experienced that knowledge died soon after experiencing that knowledge. 300 million people in the 20th century were killed by their governments. It's called democide, and it's from the 1996 University of Hawaii studies. There's a whole study on that, and it's fascinating when you go through those charts. I'm not talking war or famine or these other things. Death by government, and that usually had like a socialism or a communism and sometimes cartel capitalism involvement in that. There's a lot of clips going around this past week about, we played it last week, 600,000 criminal immigrants and 13,000 are like murderers and stuff like that, right? So I thought about it as I was going through tonight's show card, and I don't think we included too much of that in there, but 13,000 murderers running around is a lot. I said to my wife, I said, does that include Congress?
Oh, because that include like all of Washington, D.C.? Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Like over in 2003 to whenever we got out of Iraq, we killed a lot of people. In the first Gulf War, we killed a lot of people. Not we, America, taxpayer. I have ownership in the corporation, right? Or something like that. Corporation owns me. I forget which way the power goes in this place. But 1 million kids were killed over there, and all these people, because some people over here decided they had rights to drop, mother of all bombs and 2,000-pound bombs and all the other good incendiaries and phosphorus, they can kill people over there. And it's like, it's like a separate class of human beingness, because those people that kill people in other countries are coming from a very harsh environment with limited options. They might have also been falsely accused. We don't know. But 13,000 of those individuals that just kill one person, dude, we can deal with that shit, right? We're men. But when you have a whole cartel of people just dropping bombs from the sky and playing God all the time, we're probably going to need some help with that, and maybe we should keep it in balance. Like, there is a risk to going outside your house or people breaking into your house. But when you have a country and it's like, we're going to make it and invite people who want to break in, and we're not even going to give them resistance. And then we're going to play this weird game of giving them money and starting them under our employ, basically, once they break into the house. And then if things were running well enough that, women and children in this country were fed and clothed and they had shelter and veterans were taken care of, and you want to deal with political refugees, sure, I put that on the table. Sounds like our house is in order. We can do stuff like that, right? But if your house is in shambles and in risk of complete deconstruction because of external forces, and you want to come add this, right? Here's my point. We're a week and a couple days into the Hurricane Helene aftermath. Scott, can you tell me where's the list of towns in America that are sanctuary towns for people from Appalachia? Which one's going to take 20,000 people from Western North Carolina and give them food, water, housing, and give them, EBT cards and all the other good stuff that we just give people? we got too much stuff. We're just giving it away to the rest of the world. We're not taking care of the people here who pay the taxes and do the work in the first place. So I'm just asking for a friend, because I know it's a dangerous question.
Yeah, well, and I haven't seen anybody change their profile picture to the North Carolina flag. I think you still got a lot of people with their Ukraine flag up in there because the news told them to. But it's like, I don't see anybody putting a North Carolina, Florida, Tennessee flag anywhere. What's up with that, people?
That's a good idea, bro. Let's send Ukraine flags to Appalachia. Everyone puts them up on their property. They'll get instant billions. Or there's a couple other flags they could probably fly. One of them has a rainbow. They would get instant assistance from the administration in power.
Dude, that's a great idea. Everybody just come out of the closet in North Carolina. and just be
Western
like, okay,
North Carolina just all converted overnight.
That would be kind of a funny skit, actually.
It would get them publicity, and publicity would get them more help.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Call to action. Anybody out there in North Carolina? Actually, Whidbey, you know who you are. He's over in North Carolina. I don't think he was affected by it, but dude, do it.
There's somebody from like the popular thing last year that has a ton of Ukraine flags that they'll sell for like $1 at this point, and I bet we could get them wholesale.
Dude,
like
that would be so hilarious. That would be such a huge statement. Everybody we need to get a whole truckload of Ukraine flags out there. Just everybody wears it. That would be such a big political statement. That would be pretty epic, actually.
Only this podcast had millions of viewers. That'd be getting done right now.
Yeah. Man, we'll call to action, you guys. Come on. Clip Genie this. Get it out there. Let's get some attention on it.
And then let me know where to send some flags. Who is our person in that area that can distribute stuff to people?
I will talk to my buddy. He's a pretty resourceful guy. I'm going to text him right now. I'll text him at the next. I'll text him.
All right, we got clips coming up. All right, so
everyone's doing some kind of self-help these days, and you can find a million self-help courses out there. Most other courses out there are hosting lectures. They're hosting videos. They're maybe even doing Q&As, and these are great starting points to encourage learning. But at Autonomy, we believe that hands-on practice is the best way to really lock in what we're learning. There's no better way to gain confidence and mastery than through action. After each lecture, we practice the concepts we've learned with other students, giving and receiving feedback in a non-judgmental environment. The result is mastery of concepts like entrepreneurship, ethical sales, and self-reliance in an environment that directly translates to the real world. Plus, you make connections with other like-minded individuals who are learning right alongside you, and you have a lifetime membership in the community. The Autonomy course with Richard Grove equips you with confidence, competence, and courage in a world filled with confusion and noise. You can learn more at getautonomy.info. We'll see you there.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come